the tilter.
The inside of Coates.
Parker gets too heavily involved.
And that's Whitehead and Coates.
I know my destiny. I know my destiny. I know my destiny. I know my destiny.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome along to the VRRC. We are back again for a brand new championship. Your Wednesday nights are back to how you like them, with a new series, completely new set of cars, actually, that have never been used here at the VRRC before. It is time for the Cammus Simulation GTV3 Championship, we've got an enormous grid of GTE spec cars, which, as I said, have never been used here on the VRRC before. Lots of tracks that we're not that accustomed to using either, and I'm sure we're in for another fantastic season of racing. Andy McEwen talking to you from my happy place this time inside the commentary box, alongside Jack Oliphant as always. And Jack, I'm really looking forward to this. This is something very different to our last championship in the touring cars, but I'm hoping that it will result in just as exciting an 8 weeks of racing.
Yeah, it's very different to the NASCAR as well, the special event that we've had in the interim, to be fair. And you say you're back in your happy place, Andy. You seem pretty happy in a cockpit of a NASCAR as well, whilst chatting to us before. But yes, the GTV3 Championship is an exciting sort of, I suppose, step in a sideways direction. We are going for sprint races, ladies and gentlemen. Don't worry, we're not going for full-on endurance events or anything like that, I don't believe. But we are at Bahrain here tonight on the 1st of February for the opening round of the calendar. Then we're off to Monza, Istanbul, Kyalami, Watkins Glen, Fuji, Suzuka, and Silverstone. And to be fair, Andy, there's some massive circuits out there, aren't there? And you said that we haven't really sort of gone to them very often in the VRRC. You have to wonder why, because they are epic.
Yeah, I mean, looking at those 8 tracks, certainly in the time that I've been working on the VRRC, which I appreciate is less time than you, Jack, but I think the only 2 that I have called races from before on the VRRC are probably Monza and Silverstone, and even then I don't think it was the Grand Prix circuit at Silverstone, so lots of new and exciting tracks for me, and really an ideal set of tracks, I think, Jack, for these cars, because they are big, powerful GT cars. They need those wide open spaces. They need those sort of FIA Grade 1 Formula 1 style tracks. And that is what we've got here, and a really nice mix as well, even within that sort of bracket of tracks, if you like, that we were looking at. There is a bit of variety across the 8 weeks.
Exactly, yeah. And I think, to be fair, we quite often do smaller cars, don't we? You obviously mentioned that they're big gas guzzlers, these GT cars. But, you know, when we used to doing the touring cars, they're a lot smaller, a little bit slower. We used to doing the Civics, we used to doing MX-5s and all this sort of thing. So generally, it is a lot. We can get away with using the slightly smaller tracks, and quite often they're the tracks that people haven't used so much before on other platforms. Whereas these ones are almost going to the, well, you said it before, the Grade 1 style tracks where everybody should know pretty much everything about them. It's whether or not they can get to grips with the cars. Obviously, it's a difference of cars as well. We haven't just all got the same category, or the same make, I should say, actually. So it's going to be interesting to see who can sort of develop their setups as quickly as possible for each track.
Yeah, that's right. 5 different versions of GTE cars that we will see out on track. We'll cover that in a bit more detail when we dive into the qualifying session, which is coming up very, very shortly. Before we do hit the track, though, for our competitive action, Lewis Edwards shows us around a lap of the Bahrain International Circuit.
Good evening, everyone. You might not be used to hearing me live from the broadcasting PC, but for this championship, I've been live streaming the track guides so that the drivers can ask questions and watch me drive exactly as I do in my sim, so they get the exact perspective on my driving, and I think that'll help them, and I hope everybody enjoys the lap of Bahrain. There we go, that's a much better lap. Now, not quite a 0.5, but 0.6, that'll do nicely.
So the Bahrain International Circuit, the home of the Bahrain Grand Prix, of course, for, blimey, getting on for nearly 2 decades now. Another one of those tracks, Jack, that I put in the same category as places like Paul Ricard, for example. Lots of people don't like it. I personally quite enjoy this place. It's produced some really good Formula 1 racing action over the years. It's actually produced some even better sports car and GT racing action with the visits of the World Endurance Championship in recent times. And to drive, it does present a serious challenge, doesn't it?
Yeah, to be honest, I don't mind driving it either. I'll be honest, I haven't driven it that much on Assetto Corsa, which obviously is the system that we use. I haven't driven it that much on iRacing. I have driven it quite a lot on the Devil Simulator, as Rich probably would call it. Is the F1? It's not really a simulator, but the F1 games for the count the amount of years sort of thing that they've been coming out on and visiting Bahrain. But it's, I always think, quite enjoyable. There's probably only one corner, which I think everybody knows, the left-hander with the really sort of difficult braking zone going onto the back straight. That's the only one I really, really hate. But apart from that, I think it's a fairly nice flowing circuit. And while we were doing Lewis Edwards was showing off on the track guide there about how quick he can be. You were sort of noting, Andy, that the last corner is one that you absolutely despise as well. So there are little bits here and there that sort of cause hiccups for drivers. But all in all, I do enjoy it.
Yeah, absolutely. The tricky double left-hander that you're referring to at turns 9 and 10, you're right, I struggle with that. I think most drivers struggle with that, braking on a turn into a tightening corner. But at least I can admire the fact that it does require a bit of skill to get around that corner properly. The final corner is just badly designed, quite frankly, in my opinion. It's not a very fun corner, and it's really, really awkward. But it should spice up the racing, I think, because it's an easy corner to get wrong, and you've got to get off the corner well because it leads you onto that really long pit straight, which leads eventually into turn 1, which is, of course, the best overtaking opportunity on the racetrack. So, qualifying then underway, then our first qualifying session of the season, and always an exciting time this, Jack, because we never really know which of the drivers are going to steal a march on the others. Of course, we're used to seeing roughly the same group of drivers at the front of the field. That so far seems to be the case, but after what was, by his standards, a relatively off-colour season in the touring cars, which ended a few weeks ago, Eric Axelsson, I think, looking forward to getting back into a rear-wheel drive car, and he's picking up pretty much where he left off in the MX-5s.
Yeah, I think Eric's got something to prove in the NASCAR. He wasn't exactly front-running, shall we say, although, to be fair, the NASCAR was... it just tossed everything up in the air, didn't it? Anybody could have won that championship, potentially. But yeah, Eric Axelsson, I'm looking forward to seeing him back in his natural habitat, shall we say. Carl Felvers, again, he's second place in qualifying. He's back in a rear-wheel drive car, which, although he's very quick in a front-wheel drive car, he won't complain about being in a rear one, that's for sure. Joel Lask seems to be relatively quick. Scott Bugner as well, all in the top 5. Josh Martin rounds out that sort of quintuplet of drivers. And then I'm looking a little bit further back as well to see if there's any drivers that are yet to really put in a strong case for themselves. Alok Iyengar, he's sort of been a bit of a flash in the pan. We're hoping to see a little bit more consistency from him throughout this championship. And there's a few drivers. I think John Jones, unfortunately, hasn't joined us for qualifying, at least. We're hoping that he'll jump in for the race.
Yeah, and Nicky Taylor, I would argue, as well, is a little bit out of position down in 8th place. It's not a terrible position, but 1.6 seconds off the pace, where we continue to see some chopping and changing. Eric Axelsson improves to a 54.2, which was about 0.2 quicker than anybody else, but then Carl Felvers went second, just a fraction after Elliot Dalton-Ayres had done the same thing. So it's Axelsson, Felvers, Dalton-Ayres the top 3, Joel Lask is 4th, Scott Bugner 5th, and then Josh Martin in 6th position, who is, of course, our reigning champion here at the VRRC. He's got the number 1 on his car because he won the Touring Car Championship in sensational fashion in a brilliant 5-way shootout for the championship at Brands Hatch. He won race 1 from pole position, came from the back of the grid in race 2 to finish 3rd, and funnily enough, that is exactly where he settles for the time being in qualifying, with a bit of an improvement there for Josh. Interesting to see whether he can carry that championship winning momentum on into this series, Jack. It can be tricky sometimes carrying the number 1 on your car. Some drivers can feel the pressure. I get the feeling that Josh is not one of them.
No, I think he obviously races in real life, so he'll be used to having that little bit of pressure. I mean, one could argue it's a different type of pressure when you're racing in real life because you've got at least a 20 grand car around you. You don't want to wipe out as well, and plenty of other real life sort of things to be scared of. Tyre barriers hurt an awful lot more in real world as well. But having said that, to have that target on your back is one that I'm sure he'll enjoy the pressure of. I think it's one of those things where he doesn't probably feel like he has to go out there and prove himself at all. I hope not anyway, because that can sort of shackle a driver. You want to be able to be free and try and relax and get the best out of your car. And it seems, with the pace that he's showing in qualifying, that he's been able to do that. Eric Axelsson has gone purple in Sector 1 on this particular lap, but in Sector 2 hasn't been anything to shout about, and he hit in Sector 3. And one thing I would say about Josh Martin, hopefully it's been an upgrade on his hardware, because of course he won that 34-inch AOC gaming display, didn't he? So I wonder if he's using that. If we have a chat to him a little later on, we'll see if he's putting that into good use.
That is a good point. Yes, indeed. Always some good prizes up for grabs here at the VRRC. This championship no different, and we'll run you through that a little bit later on in the broadcast, perhaps, because once again we have some tasty prizes for the drivers this season. Josh Martin, there he is, third fastest, hammering the curbs, coming out of the penultimate corner. For this season, he has sort of officially teamed up with Eric Axelsson. Those two, I think, have worked together quite a lot in the past, but they're now officially part of the same team, the Mean Green Racing team, and they are looking pretty quick so far, with pole position for Axelsson at the moment, and Josh Martin, third fastest. Martin heads for the pit lane. We pick up Joel Lask, who's at the wheel of the BMW. Now, Jack, I mentioned earlier on, 5 different cars, GTE specification cars these. We've got the BMW M6 that we're seeing here, the Corvette, the Ford GT, the Porsche 911, and the Aston Martin Vantage GTE as well. 5 different cars, all of them fairly different in their design, although worth noting 4 of them now are front-engine cars, just the Porsche, which has the engine hanging out over the rear axle. Going to be interesting to see if there is any advantage to one car over the other. I know that a lot of work has gone on behind the scenes to ensure that the cars are equally balanced, but a bit like we saw in the touring cars, certain tracks can sometimes favour certain cars.
Yeah, and I think we have put a lot of work, and it is worth stressing that. Lewis Edwards especially, and Rich, and a few of the other people at VRRC have connections with, have been putting a lot of hours into lapping every single track in every single car and trying to get them all to within a setup where they're within a tenth of each other. So with fingers crossed, there shouldn't be anybody complaining about, oh, the BMW is faster at this track, or the Ford is faster here, or anything like that. They should all be fairly even. I suppose it comes down to individual driving style. As you say, they've got slightly different characteristics. Porsche obviously being rear-engined and all those sort of things, but realistically, a lot of these drivers have been racing with us for a long time now, and they don't just race with us, a lot of them. They race in various simulators and various leagues as well. You'd think they'd be able to get used to it, but it might take a couple of meetings just to get the hang of these cars. It's not like the touring cars where they're always the same every time we jump in them nearly. You know, sometimes they have a hybrid on them, sometimes they've got soft tyres or something like that, but really they're all very similarly handling characteristic cars. These could be completely different, and it's whether or not people can get tuned into them as quickly as possible.
That being said, actually, I'm quite impressed with how close things are at the top. 7 tenths covering the top 6, which, when you bear in mind this is nearly a 2-minute lap, is really close, actually, and bodes well for a pair of close 20-minute races tonight. As Jack said, just the 20-minute sprint race format, no super long pit stop races to come, and so very much about track position and trying to qualify as close to the front as you can. We do have some mid-engined representation on the grid as well, as Lewis Edwards was keen to remind me, and he is right. The Corvette, of course, these days mid-engine. It's taking me a while to get used to that, Jack. It is the first time that Chevrolet have made a mid-engined Corvette since its inception in 1953, a quick Google search tells me. So that is a very interesting design for what is a very good-looking car, and we've seen in the real world it's been very effective.
Yeah, and it seems to be pretty effective here as well, because Eric Axelsson is hustling around, and Josh Martin hustling around rather efficiently around Bahrain. So exciting to see. They've clearly jumped in that car. They clearly like the characteristic, and the fact that these, the mods that we're using are so up to date and so high detail that people can take advantage of those sort of different characteristics. It's quite interesting to see, and as I said, I think if you do become a part of the VRRC community, then the mods are available if you want to join in with the championship and stuff like that. So if you want to get your hands behind the wheel in any of these cars, by all means click the links down in the description. You can join in with the Discord or the website chat, and if you want to enter the championship, by all means, it's there, and we're still taking on people.
Absolutely, we'd love to have you along. If you've enjoyed watching the racing at home, then why not get involved? Then you'll be going toe-to-toe with this man, Eric Axelsen, who has just lost his pole position time to Kyle Felvers. Kyle Felvers in the Porsche 911. The only team really to be going for the Porsche is HFT Racing and its various affiliated drivers, and Kyle Felvers has just stuck his Porsche at the front of the field, so he is quicker than Eric Axelsen. Josh Martin third. We're following him now as he starts to get back up to speed again on another fresh set of tyres. Another interesting thing, Jack, that we probably should make note of is the track conditions, because we're trialling something a little bit different for this season. We sort of played around with this a little bit for the NASCAR special event as well. Track conditions evolving as the qualifying session goes on to sort of replicate the way that a track cleans up and rubbers in over the course of a session, so the grip level improves fractionally with every driver who completes a lap, and that means that through this qualifying session it's likely to be the time set in these final 2 minutes that are ultimately the fastest.
Yeah, and apparently, according to Lewis Edwards, the cars can react slightly differently depending on the track state as well. And when we say it's marginal, we are really talking going from 96 to 100% track grip and all that sort of thing, instead of just keeping it on 100% or wherever the previous method was that VRRC were using. But it does mean that, you're right, the last couple of minutes are all important, and we can see in the times and the sector times that are being set that is ringing true, because Kyle Felvers, even though he's just got on pole position, has just set a green sector 1 and a green sector 2 in the Porsche, and there's a couple of cars on the outside there as well. But looks like Joel Lask, we're currently following, he hasn't gone very quickly in sector 1 or 2, but he's in amongst a big gaggle of cars that all look pretty keen to try and get a little bit faster as they're starting their final lap of this qualifying session. Kyle Felvers is about to cross the line. Is he going to extend his pole position? No, in fact, I believe he loses it to Eric Axelsen, who was slow sector 1, sector 2, but he purpled sector 3, and purpled it by a long way, Andy.
Well, interestingly, despite the fact that neither of his first 2 sectors were personal best, they were both quicker than Felvers, and then he went and purpled the final sector by, only half a second faster than Felvers, so that is where he found a chunk of that time, interestingly, and Eric Axelsen does go nearly 3/10 to the good now into the final moments of qualifying, but as we've said, these track conditions evolving, the track is getting quicker, and everybody has sort of found each other on track. This group of cars we're watching, Jack, well, this is likely to be what the picture is like at the start of the race, because these are the fastest drivers in the session. They've all found each other on track, a little bit of a slipstream effect perhaps starting to take hold, and I think we could still see some more improvement. Certainly Scott Bugner with a personal best in sector 1, and that is Kyle Felvers. Kyle Felvers has just lost pole position, and he won't be getting it back, because a spin coming down the hill through turns 6 and 7 means that his final lap will not be an improvement.
Yeah, well, the classic Porsche spin, potentially a suspect there, with the rear engine maybe just flicking round on him. Oh, as we see one of the Corvettes in the background having a Porsche spin, to be honest, but not probably for the reasons why the Porsche would go round in a circle. Scott Bugner is on a green sector 1 and a purple sector 2. Scott Bugner currently sat in 6th position, a second off the pole time. He could really be throwing a spanner in the works as we focus on him now in that sort of camoed livery. Obviously a teammate of Joel Lask, those two running together. Maybe they were slipstreaming a little bit earlier, but as they come down the final straight, sorry, no, not the final straight, the back straight, I should say, going into the final corner, Scott Bugner is potentially on for a very quick time. Alok Iyengar and Sam Zero have also improved on their sector 1s. But it looks like it's going to be Scott Bugner who's going to be the big mover and shaker as he comes to the line to finish his qualifying session. Scott Bugner jumps up to 3rd place, displacing Josh Martin.
Much more like it from Scott Bugner, and that does now put 3 different makes of car in the top 3 positions as well. The Corvette of Axelsen, the Porsche of Felvers, and now the BMW of Scott Bugner. The top Ford is Elliot Dalton-Ayres in 6th position, and there were only 2 Aston Martins scheduled to race, Reece Bell and Stuart Vickers. Vickers down in 17th, Bell is 14th, so at the moment the Aston Martin, the only car really not represented right towards the pointy end. Now Nicky Taylor, in his customary livery, customary yellow livery even, is about to have a dive bomb from a BMW behind him into the final corner. That will not have helped his chances of improving. He's a lot further down than you might expect. 10th fastest. It was a personal best in the middle sector, but perhaps because of that final corner, he will bail for the pit lane. I think that the BMW in question was Alok Iyengar, though, and he jumps up into 7th place. So quite a few movers and shakers there in the closing minutes of what was a very, very exciting qualifying session. I think that track state changing as the session went on was really effective through that qualifying. So our first pole position of the season, perhaps unsurprisingly, has gone to the Swedish assassin, and Eric Axelsson will line his mean green racing Corvette from pole position in just a few minutes' time. We'll be back with the start of race number 1 in just a few minutes. Welcome back to the VRRC and the start of a brand new season of racing. It's the Cammus Simulation GTV3 Championship, and we have just completed our first qualifying session of the season. And it's a very familiar interview that you're about to hear, because not for the first time in his time racing with the VRRC, it's Eric Axelsson who nabs pole position. But Eric, we didn't see a lot of you at the front of the grid in the touring cars. We did sort of wonder whether a return to rear-wheel drive might mean a return to your qualifying domination. So far, so good.
Oh yeah, thank you, Andy. Yeah, at least I hope so. I think rear-wheel drive is where I feel the best. So hopefully, yeah.
I say that this is a return to rear-wheel drive, and that is sort of your forte, but these cars are very different, really, to anything else that we've raced, certainly in the recent past here. What's your sort of first impression of them as we build up towards this first race of the season?
They are like really fast and also very stable. So they're very like nice to drive and easy to drive for being like GT cars. So yeah, I think they will make for some really good and close racing.
It certainly looks that way. Are you surprised at how close the qualifying times are? Because a big track like this, a car that perhaps isn't as easy to drive as some of the other ones that we've seen recently, it's still just as competitive as ever.
Yeah, it is, and I think it is. You know, we have like such a high like quality on the field of all the drivers. So I think everyone will be like pushing it to the limit. So I think it will be really close one.
Qualifying session was also interesting because we were trialing this new sort of track evolving idea where the grip level starts to increase as more laps are completed. How much of an effect do you think that had, and do you think that's a bit of a game changer now when it comes to your qualifying strategy?
Yeah, it might be actually, because you're really feeling that you know, you're like getting like quicker and quicker every lap, or at least like towards the end of the qualifying session and also the practice, you know. So I think that will be like some kind of strategy. You have to like go out as late as possible and put that your best lap in and make sure the car is in the window for that.
Well, certainly it worked out well for you, Eric. You are starting from pole position, the best place to be, I think, ahead of this first 20-minute race. We'll let you go ahead and continue with your pre-race prep, but best of luck.
Thank you, Andy.
So, Eric Axelsson on pole position once again, and I'm not hugely surprised to hear that, Jack. We know that he's very good in qualifying situations, but let's wait and see. I think it's going to be a competitive race.
Yeah, it is, and he mentioned the quality of the rest of the field there in the interview, and he's absolutely bang on, to be honest. We've seen some epic battles between himself and Kyle Felvers. I'm excited to see those two sort of starting on the front row of the grid together. We obviously got Scott Bugner and Josh Martin. I'm pretty sure that's a commentary a duo we've been commentating on and sort of on epic battles before as well. Joel Lask backing up Scott Bugner, Josh Martin backing up Eric Axelson now as well. Alok Iyengar, I mentioned him in the sort of build-up to the qualifying, saying we're hoping for a little bit more consistency from him because we know he's got decent speed when he gets it right. He's qualified in 7th place. He's got every opportunity at mixing it to try and get into that top 5 as well. And Oliver Gibson, unfortunately, Jack Smith can't be sort of with us for this championship, but Oliver Gibson, he's sort of been in and around the last 2 or 3 championships. Can he make a bit of a step forward as well and start moving and shaking with the bigger boys as well? We'll have to wait and see, but all I know is Bahrain has some really good overtaking opportunities, and really fast cars means probably a few mistakes. We should be in for an entertaining race.
I think so. This is going to be a very, very interesting first 20-minute race of the season. Different tyre compounds available for the drivers as well, of course. The soft, medium and hard tyres making a return, and that will be another interesting strategy call. No pit stops during the race, though, so that means that whatever tyre compound you choose to start with, you're stuck with for the duration of the race. So it's Eric Axelson now pole position with Kyle Felvers alongside Corvette and Porsche on the front row. A standing start as well, which is not normal perhaps for GT style racing. Will that give an advantage perhaps to that rear engine Porsche, which is known for its brilliant traction and acceleration? Let's go racing then. For the first time here in Bahrain, the rear tyres lit up, but Eric Axelson has another one of his demon starts. Felvers actually is not that quick away, and up the inside line comes Josh Martin from 3rd on the grid. The reigning champion will challenge for 2nd into the first corner. Axelson will lead the way. They're 3 wide for 2nd. On the outside goes Scott Bugner. Martin will slip through into 2nd position. Bugner will battle Felvers for 3rd, whilst further back Sam Zero, after a promising qualifying session, is out wide at turn 1.
Absolutely epic start from Josh Martin. He's not going to have it all his own way, though, because I'm guessing Scott Bugner and Carl Felvers, if they can stop falling over each other, will launch an attack back. But at the moment, they're attacking each other, aren't they? With Carl Felvers being swamped somewhat off the start of the race. Maybe he hasn't done enough practice starts in his new Porsche. He did say in the build-up, Andy, that it was one of the more stable off the line, but it doesn't seem to be able to go that way for Mr. Felvers. And Bugner's been fought off, but Joel Lask, his teammate, has gone for a little nibble on the HFT leading driver at the moment, and there's a little bit of a rubbing as they go into the double left-hander. This is the one that I was hating, turn 9 and 10. They all seem to get the car stopped with Felvers hitting the apex and then some. He gets a good drive off, but look at those Corvettes. They're off into the distance.
They look strong, don't they? And actually, it's the Porsche struggling, it seems. Carl Felvers just not getting up to speed. Now, as good as the Porsche is, in theory, in the early stages, it can suffer a little bit sometimes for front tyre temperature. There's no weight over that front axle, remember, so it doesn't work the front tyres quite as hard as some of the other cars. Perhaps that's what Felvers is feeling, a bit of an understeer imbalance in the car. Lewis Edwards, by the way, was posing the question in our production chat about whether anyone would take the gamble, as he saw it, of starting on soft tyres. Well, actually, soft tyres are by far and away the most popular choice. We've got a sideways BMW, that's Simon Thorpe, who after 2 or 3 attempts at catching the slide ends up in the barriers. But yeah, Jack, soft tyres by far the most popular choice. The top 6 cars all on the softest rubber.
Yeah, you have to go all the way down to Elliot Dalton Ayres in 7th place to find the medium tyres. And then there's a bit of a string of them, to be fair. Oliver Gibson's on the soft, and I think actually those two are trying to fight over the 7th position, actually going into turn 1. Joel Lask and Scott Bugner trying to sort out their own little in-battle feud to try and catch up to the likes of Carl Felvers. But yeah, I think the soft, that's going to be interesting to see if they go the distance. A lot of these drivers will have done lots of practice laps, especially going into Bahrain on the practice service. So they'll have done it on the mediums, they'll have done it on the softs, they'll have been editing little bits of the setup as well to try and make them last for as long as possible. So I think it's quite interesting with the fact that we see such a split. I'd have thought everybody would go on the same compound of tyres, but maybe people are, got different driving styles out there, Andy. At the end of the day, we saw Josh Martin, Eric Axelson. They're very smooth. We've seen that in touring cars. Clearly in rear-wheel drive, they're pretty smooth as well because they're confident they can get those softs to the end.
And I think that's a driving style that will suit these GT cars as well, because these are high power but also high downforce cars. They've got a lot of grip through the middle of the corners. You don't want to be snatching at that steering wheel.
Yeah.
Nice smooth inputs. That's the way to drive a high downforce car. And I really think that's why we're seeing Axelsen and Martin excelling so far. Although in the middle sector, Josh Martin excelling a bit more than his teammate, closing in briefly before the gap creeps back out to 1.2 seconds. Kyle Felder's still third and Joel Lask in fourth. But it does seem now that Kyle is perhaps starting to settle into this third place.
Yeah, I thought we saw a little bit of a correction from Joel Lask there as well. So maybe the BMW is becoming a little bit harder to drive. Maybe in those early stages, it was actually the BMW that was a little bit on top. But you're right, Carl Felvis, maybe he's just into a rhythm. Maybe, you know, sometimes just getting off the start line and it doesn't go your way. You're swamped by a few cars. You're trying to figure out where to put your car so you don't lose all the amount of places. All of a sudden, you forget about the racing lines. You forget about driving smooth and all those sort of important inputs that you would be doing if you were just in qualifying or just in practice or just in the race as it beds in. And maybe that's just Kyle's just got back into his rhythm. He's calmed himself down and he's able to switch himself back on and try and go for those hot laps.
Absolutely. Joel Aspen struggling a little bit in the tank-like BMW, which is, I'm pretty certain, the biggest racing car ever built. It does rather fill the Bahrain International Circuit, but Joel Lask and Scott Bugner running competitively and actually part of a BMW trio because Alok Iyengar is in sixth. Now, you said, I think you described his previous form at the VRRC as a bit flash in the pan-like. Well, he's having one of his flashes tonight, isn't he?
Yeah.
Iyengar really looking strong.
He is indeed, yeah. I mean, he's a real life racer as well. I think was it something a Formula Ford or something like that. I believe.
F1000.
F1000 is it? Yeah. So it's interesting to see that. I thought he would come into the championship and be a little bit stronger than he has been, to be honest. So I quite like the fact that we're starting to, as he makes a massive mistake into turn 10, but we did say that it's a very difficult corner to slow down for. I like the fact that we're seeing a little bit more sort of speed from him, not just in reverse grid races, because of course a lot of those flash in the pan style races from drivers a little bit further back in the field do come in a reverse grid race. Well, he's done it in qualifying, and if he can stay in the top 6, I'd say that's a pretty damn good result going into a championship. I think everybody would be happily sort of sitting somewhere in the top 6 on the first race. So yeah, Alok's doing really good.
Remember, he had a really good start to the season in touring cars, didn't he? Not in race 1, actually. He finished last in race 1, but that gave him a good grid position for race 2, and he led most of that second race, eventually finishing second to Scott Bugner. Ooh. And it's Scott Bugner just ahead of him, and there Bugner's teammate Joel Lask with a big snap of oversteer into that final corner. Bit too much rear brake bias, or was he actually trying to have a go at Felvis?
I don't know. I almost thought it looked like he was having a nose up the inside of Felvis, but I think, to be honest, he just missed his braking zone. He thought, oh, where's the best place that I'm not going to hit this Porsche? So he all of a sudden, he aimed up the inside, and he thought, no, that's not going to work. That's closing door. So he went just straight on, luckily. So, yeah, Joel certainly struggling. It wouldn't be an idea to swap himself and Bugner around if Joel can't quite seem to get the lap times out of it anymore, because Kyle is just going to drive further and further away if they're going to make mistakes.
Well, these two may be teammates, Jack, but they don't have the best history of working together, do they, Joel Lask and Scott Bugner? The two of them making quite a bit of contact at various points over the course of the touring car season, leading Scott Bugner to, I think, semi-jokingly make the point that his teammate cost him the championship last time we raced here, but both of the BMWs looking very, very snappy under braking, and it's almost as if they've wound the brake bias right to the back. That car, I think, can be a bit understeery, and perhaps they're trying to combat that by winding the brake bias back, and that is why they're really struggling to get the car safely into the corners. That winding of the bias back, I think that's something that's quite significant on these cars, Jack, and you, the professional racing driver, perhaps can explain a little bit about what that does.
Yeah, I mean, the brake bias has always been a bit of a dark art for me. I don't really know why. I remember jumping in the Ginetta, and Century was set up with the brake bias, and they would strap me in so tight I couldn't actually reach the dial for the brake bias. It was really annoying. The only time I've ever touched it was when it started raining a little bit, and I think I dialed it backwards to make it a little bit more stable, I think. I can't quite remember, actually, but it is one of those things where we've got pretty much fixed setup here at VRRC for all these cars, because obviously we've got to try and make them as even as possible. But there are little bits and bobs that you can do to obviously suit your driving style, and clearly Joel and Scott, I don't know if we can jump on board with them, but I think there's a lot of snap oversteer at the mid corner as well. I mean, going through that final corner, obviously the brakes into it, they're struggling, but they're also struggling at that mid corner. As soon as they hit the apex, they're having to correct, and almost they're trying to over-rotate the car on the rear, and so it's getting a little bit messy for them. It's not exactly smooth at all, and unfortunately the stream is not very smooth for me either, so I can't actually see their inputs very well. But yeah, I think they're struggling slightly.
It certainly looks that way. You can see the way that Kyle Felvis is racing away from them, although Kyle isn't lapping as quickly as the race leader still. He sort of matched Josh Martin on the previous lap, but was about 3, nearly 4 tenths slower than the race leader Eric Axelsen, who really is in a class of his own so far. We're ticking very quickly towards half race distance here, and he's built up a nearly 3-second cushion over Martin in second, Felvis third. Fourth place, you're riding on board with him now. Joel Last dropping down through the tight right-hander at turn 8, which is a potential overtaking opportunity. And I think we will see a lot more of that in use in race 2, Jack. This is a very typical first race of the season, isn't it, really, this one, where I think everyone's kind of minding their manners a bit, just trying to make sure that they finish the race, bank some points to start with. We see this quite often here at VRRC. Race 1 of the season, by far the tamest race of the season, before it then starts to get a bit more lively later on.
Yeah, I think everybody's just got to finish. As I said before about Airlock Iron Guy, you know, it's finishing in the top 6. Pretty much everyone in this grid will take a finish in the top 6 on the first race of the season. As we go through the season, even these race 1s will start to spice up. We know that from the touring cars, we know that from the Civics, we know that from the MX-5 championships that we've been doing in the past as well, where all of a sudden every point counts. But at the beginning, you do just want to make sure that you get the points in the bank. You know, finishing consistently is the most important thing. You can't win a championship in the first corner, but you can certainly lose it, as the old saying goes. So Eric Axelsen, pretty much everyone, actually, I don't think we've seen that many drivers fully spin, have done a really good job so far. One driver that we haven't mentioned so far, but is new to the championship, he's currently racing down in 16th position, but it's worth giving him a bit of a shout out here, is Ben Jamison. I'm going to go with Jamison. And he's down in 16th. He's obviously rocking the Corvette.
Yes, he is indeed, and great to have a new name on board with the VRRC here. We always like to have new drivers coming along, as we were saying, and even if you're not immediately on Eric Axelsen's pace, I mean, let's face it, not many people are, then you will still have someone to fight with, and Ben is enjoying a nice little scrap with Stuart Vickers, although he nearly runs into the back of Stuart as they drop into the first corner. But Stuart actually part of a new team for this championship as well, Phoenix Sim Racing. He is teamed up with Reese Bell. They are the two Aston Martins, the lone two Aston Martins on the grid for this season, and their aim is to help differently abled people to enjoy motorsport and sim racing. And as two disabled drivers, Stu and Reese have created this team to help other people or carers of people with disabilities and see what sim racing can do to help and support their requirements. So it's great to have them here. I know that I think it was Stuart saying that he's actually fashioned a sort of hand control system for racing on the sim, which he might trial at some point this season too. So great to have those two working together and racing for a really good cause.
Yeah, it's brilliant, to be honest, and you see it in real world racing. People put a lot of effort, a lot of time in to obviously get people out there in the real world on track. That you sort of almost forget slightly about sim racing, but I mean, in the same way that anybody who wants to be a racing driver wants to, who can't go into the real world, they want to jump on a sim most of the time, don't they? And it's the same for obviously people like Stuart Vickers who are wanting to represent and wanting to get them in as well. There should never be a barrier, and it is brilliant to see these guys out there on a stream like this, you know, putting in the good word basically, and hopefully helping an awful lot of people out there, just inspiring people to sort of get a bit creative with their sim setups and see if they can get out there on circuit.
Yeah, and really, whoever you are, sim racing is a very, very welcoming place, I've found, and yeah, really no better place actually to be spreading that sort of message. And great to have them out here. Stuart Vickers struggling a bit in 15th right now. Reese Bell is inside the top half of the top dozen, but of course that will put them both in good order for the reversed grid, because we will reverse all of the finishers at the end of this race to give us the grid for race 2. Mr. Simon Thorpe unfortunately would not be eligible for that reverse. He is officially retired to the pit lane, but Ben Jemison at the moment would be on the pole position. So back towards the pointy end then, and Joel Last now settling down a bit, Jack. He's gapping Scott Bugner and closing in on Felvis, and they're all closing in on Josh Martin, who I've noticed a few times at that corner, running a little bit wide. So 4 cars grouping together now in the fight for second place, with 7.25 minutes to go, Jack. This is looking tasty.
Yeah, if we had the advantage of DRS, it would be on DRS range, wouldn't it now, all of a sudden? Carl Felvis within 6 tenths, or within 7 tenths of a second, sorry, of Josh Martin, and he's dragging a few drivers along with him. I wouldn't say that Kyle's been particularly electric fast compared to the BMWs behind them. They've all sort of stagnated since they've got a little bit of a gap between them. But Josh Martin does seem to be the driver that is struggling. Just having a look at his last lap, he was about 0.3 of a second, well, 0.2 of a second down on Eric Axelsen on the last lap. Not a massive margin. So I think this lap he's particularly had some mistakes, because look at that, the gap between first and second now is absolutely enormous, and with the slipstream, Carl Felvis might be licking his lips here for the last 6.5 minutes.
And I think that is why Josh Martin's moving to the middle of the track to defend. He's not moving across quite as much as Alok Iyengar is, though. He has dropped well off the back of this group and is practically hugging the pit wall heading past the pits. But Elliot Dalton-Ayres in the Ford GT has got the run. He's got his nose ahead into the braking zone. Iyengar will fight back into turn 1, though, and the LED number briefly turns back to 6 on the side of the car. Now it's 7 again, though, because he ran too wide. Dalton-Ayres got the better exit. Alok Iyengar, another driver, I think, starting to slip down the order. That is Stuart Vickers, meanwhile. And has he tangled with Ben Jemison? It looks to me a bit like Ben is going slowly as well. There's a flash of the lights from Stuart, and I think those two may well have tangled there through the penultimate corner.
Yeah, I think they potentially hit themselves. Much like the viewers at home can hit that like and subscribe button if you're enjoying the stream so far. I've been asked by Rich Hayden to potentially plug that for you, ladies and gentlemen, but I thought I'd try and do it in the cheesiest way possible. A bit of a shame for Stuart and Ben Jemison, but they have swapped positions. Potentially Ben at fault there, giving the place back.
You have got a career as a YouTuber just ready and waiting to go, Jack. Well done. That was as smooth as butter. Right, that's this second place battle heading its way towards the end of the race now. 5.25 minutes to go. And Josh Martin's going to have some real defending to do now, because Felvis, Lask and Bugner all quicker than him. Well, perhaps not Bugner. He's dropped a second behind Joel Lask, but the Porsche and the first of the BMWs are starting to loom ever larger in the, I was going to say, rearview mirror on the Corvette, but I think the Corvette, like all of these GTE cars, actually has a rear view camera, which is the trend these days, it seems. Whatever it is that Josh Martin's using to look behind him, he will be trying to ignore it, because those two cars are getting closer and closer, and he'll be feeling the heat now for sure.
Yes, it's probably actually function button 10 or something on his steering wheel, really, that he's looking behind him potentially. But it is getting a little bit squeaky bum time, shall we say, for Josh Martin. Although since his mistake, he hasn't made too many more. In fact, I think he's, on that lap, potentially pulled out about 0.3 of a second on Carl Felder. So maybe Carl had a little nibble or something that we didn't quite see or didn't quite pick up on. And he didn't make the move stick. And that's why he dropped back a touch, because Joel Lask was also about 0.4 quicker than Kyle Felder. So there's sort of toing and froing. It's sort of a bit of a tug of war at the moment, isn't it, Andy, between these three drivers? I don't think Scott Bugner's really in the conversation at the moment, but if they start falling over each other, you never know. That car could start coming back in.
Alok Iyengar losing another place there. Oliver Gibson drags his Porsche up into 7th place now. Good looking livery on that Porsche, isn't it, for Oliver Gibson. And Iyengar dropping down into 8th position. Nicky Taylor, by the way, 4.2 seconds behind these two in 9th place, having a real disaster of a race. Iyengar, I think, was going back up the inside of Gibson just as we pulled away. Yes, he was. The BMW man launches it up the inside. He's not backwards in coming forwards and not afraid of those late lunges up the inside, is Iyengar, but once again, comes to nothing for the time being, but visibly carrying more speed into the turns than Gibson. But that is the difference in the cars, isn't it? The rear engine Porsche, it's all about focusing on that corner exit speed, whereas the BMW with a bit more weight over the front axle, the front is a bit grippier under braking, and you can carry that extra speed in, and that's going to be really fascinating to watch over the season, because the two cars, and you can say the same about the mid-engine Corvette as well, will generate their lap time in very different ways.
Yeah, I think if I was Alok Iyengar, you'd always be very frustrated, because you'd be trying to overdrive it out of the corner, really. You can send all the speed in, you sort of get that whiff of hope that you might be able to send it up the inside of them or something, but then the car's slightly out of position, it's slightly out of shape, and you get on the power, and all of a sudden that lovely Porsche traction just pulls Oliver Gibson away, and all of a sudden you have to do all that hard work under braking again, and obviously that's potentially where the car is more upset anyway in terms of the BMW. That's what we've seen from two of the drivers that are in amongst this fight now, but it looks like Carl Felvis is going for an attack on Josh Martin around the outside of turn number 1. 2.5 minutes to go, and there's contact between the two of them. Josh Martin receiving it and managing to ride it out, it looks like, and he's staying in second place for the time being, but Carl Felvis getting a little bit more racy now.
Yeah, definitely. Up towards turn 3 they go, and of course he's got Joel Lask weaving around in his mirrors as well. There'll be time for one more lap at the end of this too, so just under 2 laps left in the race, and Josh Martin clearly struggling. I think a few drivers out there are struggling with their tyres, and Jack, to me it seems like it's the drivers who were pushing really hard at the start of the race are now starting to struggle. Now, my theory for that is all to do with this track evolution again, because one thing I noticed from racing in the NASCAR series, when the track is low grip, the cars of course slide around a lot more. Much easier to overheat the tyres in the first couple of laps, so that now that the track is grippy, you've taken too much out of the tyres, and this is where they're starting to struggle. Whereas someone like Axelsen, who was just able to calmly and smoothly gap the field in the first few laps, he's perhaps been able to manage that tyre situation even more. So that is another thing that the drivers will have to consider here, with the track conditions perhaps not starting off at the absolute optimum.
Yeah, and you know what else? There's the track conditions, and then there's the second part of it that we mentioned at the beginning of the race, which is the tyres that they've picked as well. If you're looking at these top 5, they're all on the soft tyres. They're all starting to struggle slightly. Now, if you're looking at the sector times, there is one driver who went quicker in Sector 1 than he has done in the past with this track evolution, and it is Elliot Dalton Ayres on the mediums in that Ford GT in 6th position at the moment. I'm not going to say he's going to catch these guys within the next lap or anything like that, but maybe the mediums do become the stronger tyre right at the end of the race. But we are right at the end of the race, aren't we, Andy, really? So it is not a massive advantage for going on the mediums if you're looking for that longevity.
Yeah, it might be a little, too late, and that perhaps is something that, again, they'll consider for the later races in the season. All of them sort of wiggling around under braking there into that first corner. Carl Felvers once again stuck behind the sizable Corvette in front of him, and the three of them continue to run in the same order. 5 seconds they are now adrift of Eric Axelsen out in front, who is on his way to yet another race win. We need to at some point calculate, I think, the number of race wins that Eric's had with us at the VRRC, because he's been winning with astonishing regularity over recent seasons. Felvers and Lask inventing their own track as they come down the hill. They are giving it everything here to find a way past our reigning champ.
Yeah, it's becoming a little bit stressful in the cockpit, even if it doesn't feel like we're getting too stressed about it or too excited. I'm sure they're pretty much hanging on for dear life in their respective sim rigs. Carl Felvers throwing everything at it and trying to get into the slipstream, trying to get the traction off the line. I think, although looking back at the end, when he's come to the end of this championship, a 3rd place in race number 1 is nothing to be sniffed at. It's not to be thrown away anyway. The HFT driver probably needs to keep that in mind. He wants to win. He'll want to even come 2nd, still better than 3rd, isn't it? But realistically, 3rd place, being on the podium at race 1 of the season, is a good start. Hopefully he'll keep that in mind as he goes cannoning towards the final corner. Oh, that's the... Oh, wow.
It goes wide all over the dirt. He is completely sideways, and just at the last corner, Carl Felvers might have a chance. Side by side, they run into the final corner. Martin will have to be desperately late on the brakes, which he is. He may well end up overshooting the corner, though. Felvers gets the switchback, but he has a snap of oversteer as well. It's going to be a near dead heat for 2nd. No, Felvers clears him. Axelsen already has taken the checkered flag. Who will be 2nd? It is Felvers by a 10th over Martin 3rd. Lask 4th, Bugner 4th, Dalton Ayres in 5th position. Oh, Josh Martin's brilliant defence just crumbled with a couple of corners to go. Just as we were starting to think that Felvers was too far back, the mistake finally came, and it cost him 2nd place. You've got to feel a bit there for Josh Martin, who will still be on the podium, but 1 step further down than we thought.
Yeah, no, it's as we were saying, as I was saying that I think he'll be happy with 3rd place, or he should be happy with 3rd place. Josh Martin pretty much gifts him 2nd place. Gift is probably a little bit of a let-off, I'd say. Probably a bit harsh, because Carl Felvers really did have to try hard to overtake him right at the end there into that final corner. He drove really well to put him under that amount of pressure, but still, Josh won't be too happy. I'm sure Dave won't be too happy either in the YouTube chat. We're going to have a chat to our top 3 drivers, which of course involve Carl Felvers and Josh Martin after this very short break.
Welcome back, everyone, to virtual Bahrain, and we've just had a very entertaining first race of the season, the Cammus Simulation GTV3 Championship, which has provided a runaway race victory for Eric Axelsen, but a very, very entertaining fight for the lower podium places. We're going to start by interviewing our race winner, though, and it is a lights to flag victory. Dominance so far this season, then, for Eric Axelsen. Eric, congratulations. You made that look very easy. I'm sure that you were managing quite a few things from your perspective, but really a dream start to the season.
Well, yeah, that went according to plan, shall we say? Yeah, just had a really like a good start and like got away good in the beginning of the race, and then I could just like control it from there, I think.
Control is the word, really. You had brilliant control right from the very first few seconds of the race when you made another one of your excellent getaways off the line. These are not cars that we would normally see doing a standing start. Are they tricky to get off the line? You certainly seem to have the knack for it.
Well, with some like traction control, they're okay to get off the line. But yeah, a rolling start would like maybe be ideal, but yeah, it's working fine with the standing.
Certainly, you got away well, and from there, able to control the race. Of course, you won't have that luxury in race 2. We did see it was fairly difficult to pass when the race did settle down behind you anyway. How concerned are you about that going into race 2? Because you really could do with making some progress here. It's important to score good points in both races.
Yeah, of course, it will be tough. So I honestly don't know what the racing will be like and how hard and easy it will be to pass. It will be, yeah, nice to find out.
Excellent stuff. Well, Eric, congratulations on that lights to flag victory in our opening round of the championship, and best of luck for race 2.
Thank you.
So, Eric Axelsen then with a race victory, chased, well, I was going to say chased hard by second place. Really, the second place battle involved in very much a fight of their own, and Jack Oliphant now catches up with our eventual runner-up.
Yes, Carl Felvis, how wide did your eyes go when you saw Josh Martin take himself off on that penultimate corner?
Yeah, very. That was definitely the best opportunity I had all race. Josh, he was sliding around sort of most corners. I could see that he was either pushing his tyres a bit much or just making some mistakes. And I sort of was trying to stay back slightly because I didn't really want to get into a battle and then get dropped back into Joel. So I was trying to stay back, and then that opportunity came and I just had to take it.
I was going to say, you did have a bit of a headache looking backwards as well, didn't you? I'm sure Josh was feeling the pressure, but you had Joel Lask and Scott Bugner, to be fair, pretty much there all race long as well. How much was it that you were just wanting to keep your position rather than lose one, or were you really aiming for that, obviously, to try and push Josh into that mistake?
Yeah, I mean those Beamers are some mean-looking cars, and when they're both camo liveries, they're quite scary in your rearview mirror. I was trying to settle for the third, but like I say, the opportunity came and had to take it.
Well, fair enough. You took it very well, Carl. Congratulations on the second place, and we'll potentially be speaking to you after race 2.
Thank you.
Very much. Congratulations, Kyle, on second place. And, well, really, we should have been having that interview with our next driver, certainly in his opinion anyway. But Josh Martin, unfortunately, it all went wrong for you with just a couple of corners to go. But it sounds like, from what you were just telling us during the break, the problem started sometime before that.
Yeah, I haven't got long because the race is about to start. But yeah, very messy from my point of view. I made too many mistakes in the first half of the race, which killed my tyres. And yeah, I had nothing left at the end. So hopefully this race will be a lot less messy for me and I can make a few less mistakes.
Stuff. We'll let you go then, Josh. Thanks for popping in to have a chat. Best of luck for race 2.
Cheers.
So there you have it then, our podium finishers from a frenetic opening race of the season. An interesting one, certainly everyone reasonably well behaved through the early stages at least. Let's see if that continues to be the case now that we reverse the entirety of the grid. Every driver who finished race 1 is now inverted to give us the race 2 grid. So it's Stuart Vickers and Ben Jemison on pole. The green Aston Martin is Vickers, the yellow Corvette is Ben Jemison. The red lights go out and we're away and racing again here at Bahrain. Paul Laramie with a very aggressive start and a terrible getaway from the pole sitter. So Stuart Vickers will drop down the order slightly then, I suspect, as they turn into the first corner, just waiting for the timing tower to catch up with itself. But everyone else making the dive for turn 1. They're 4 abreast in the mid-pack. That is never going to work. And inevitably there is contact. Around goes the number 27 car of Vickers, that was. Off wide too has gone Josh Martin. There's been pandemonium at turn 1, Jack.
Yep, and a safety car has been called as well, so that's not entirely surprising. To be honest, my stream went a little bit laggy, so I didn't quite see what caused it, how many people were involved or anything like that, but it was always a little bit of inevitable as they were hurtling towards the first corner, especially Stuart Vickers. He got a terrible start off the line, and it was a little bit sort of, you were watching it thinking he's going to get swamped by 2, 3, 4, and then almost the entire field kept trying to go past him as well and dive bombing each other at the same time. So yeah, a bit of a difficult one. Luckily, I think most people have managed to get through unscathed, or they're going to manage to actually catch up to the back of it. Sam Zero, Kenny Press, Paul Laramie, Ben Jemiston. Bit of a shame for him on his debut, I believe. But yeah, it's a bit of a shame for those guys, but hopefully they'll catch up to the back and they won't have too much damage. Currently, Reese Bell leads, Mandy Carroll, Nikki Taylor, Oliver Gibson, and Eric Axelson has managed to get his way all the way from last position up into 5th. And to be fair, Andy, his teammates joined him in 6th.
Absolutely. I don't know how they've done that, quite frankly. I noticed that Axelson's car has a little bit of damage on it, possibly not enough to inhibit his speed, perhaps, but certainly he's been involved in a couple of little scrapes. You can see them weaving around to try and get some heat into the tyres, whilst Reese Bell leads them around under the virtual safety car that will be ending at the conclusion of this lap. So Bell, Carroll, Taylor, the top 3. Interesting to see what pace Taylor's got now from the front of the pack. Also interesting to note, very quickly before we go racing again here, the tyre choices. Top 3 on medium tyres, that's not such a surprise. I think they all went for mediums last time as well. But Eric Axelson going for the mediums. So although he seemed to have an easy time of it in race 1, he clearly was a bit concerned about tyre management. And again, Jack, I think that lends itself to my theory that they're worried about taking it out of the tyres in the early stages. Eric knew that he had some overtaking to do and perhaps wouldn't be able to look after the tyres in quite the same way he did in race 1.
I tell you what, they've clearly got a hotline to you, haven't they there, Andy? They've listened to you and they've put it into action as Reese Bell hears that the green flag's about to fly and he puts his foot down early. He's got a really good start ahead of Andy Carroll, who's probably not had the start he wanted compared to Nikki Taylor, who's in 3rd place. They're not allowed to overtake each other until the start-finish line, the safety car line, whatever you want to call it. You can see Carl Felvers actually in the background in the Porsche trying to get the run on, who is that? It's Alok Iyengar, isn't it? And I think he is going to manage to do such a thing. The 2 Corvettes up ahead of him are Eric Axelson and Josh Martin, but Carl Felvers trying to dive up to the inside of Alok Iyengar. There's a little bit of turning in from both drivers, weirdly, and it looks like Carl has managed to secure that 7th place.
Yeah, that was interesting then. So Carl Felvers moving through into 7th position. I noticed Nikki Taylor, his teammate as well, has got past Andy Carroll, and Oliver Gibson is now doing exactly the same thing. So those two both working their way nicely up the order, although Andy Carroll's going to argue the fact and in fact chops back across in front of Oliver Gibson. So the Corvette staying ahead of the second of those Porsches for now. Gibson, though, clearly is quick and wants to get on with this because you can see Axelson and Martin and Felvers all queuing up behind him, but Andy Carroll is under no obligation to roll out of the way, and he is defending that 3rd place well.
Yeah, I don't think we're questioning, and nobody will be questioning what Andy Carroll wants, and it's 3rd place. And as Oliver Gibson tries to hold off an attacker from around the outside of Eric Axelson, and I think he might well have just managed to pull this one off. He's going to be on the outside again, though, going into turn 11. Andy, this is going to be very brave. It's a long, fast corner, and in fact, he slots up to the rear bumper of the Porsche. In fact, no, he's going for that switchback, isn't he? I tell you what, this is some very close racing indeed, and could be quite effective, or it could be quite costly for Eric Axelson. He's not messing around with those medium tyres, is he? He's really leaning on the tyre wall, and he's managed to get the place back. Brilliantly done.
Grab side at turn 12. Now, in my experience in these cars, turn 12 is not flat. You do have to lift through there, and when you're going side by side, maybe it's even a dab on the brakes. So to go right the long way round was very impressive indeed. Gibson now on the outside line as Carl Felvers goes up the inside of Josh Martin. So Josh Martin dropping a position or 2 here on the restart, certainly relative to his teammate Axelson, who is gaining ground, and Eric, I'm sure, is about to have a go for the race lead as they make their way towards turn number 1. The leaders have gone through with Nikki Taylor comfortably faster than Reese Bell ahead. Axelson is up the inside of Andy Carroll, and there goes Felvers up the inside of Oliver Gibson, trying to make it 2 places in 2 corners. The Smart Fire driver does his best to hang on around the outside, but will give that 5th place up.
Yeah, Carl Felvers really being very efficient with the way he's overtaking the cars at the moment. He got Alok Iyengar pretty quickly. He got Oliver Gibson and Josh Martin, obviously. Well, Josh Martin and Oliver Gibson was in the space of 2 corners, really. So, yeah, he's a man on a mission at the moment. Is Kyle as Josh Martin goes past Oliver Gibson. Now everybody's keeps chopping and changing position. But at the moment, Reese Bell and Nicky Taylor, first and second, without too many headaches from behind.
Felvers up the inside of Carroll. That was aggressive, but it's going to work, I think. 4th place, the Porsche wriggles out of the hairpin, but again, the next corner's a left-hander. We saw Andy Carroll defend this position successfully a lap ago. Felvers getting a bit frustrated now, I think, behind the silver and yellow Corvette, which just drifts a bit wide at the apex of the left-hander at turn 10. Tell you what, race 1 was pretty calm. This is much more like it. You can always trust a reversed grid race to provide us with some good side-by-side action, and it's doing so here today. Felvers finally getting the job done into turn number 11, and he takes 4.
Yeah, so for me, Felvers is putting a strong case for driver of the day early on in this season, isn't he? He's, as long as there's no major contact, there's no bidding of anybody, I think it's going to be pretty hard to argue against him as Josh Martin carves his way through and Andy Carroll finally getting the move done, probably about a lap too late, really, from his perspective, and he can now get on the charge and chase down the Porsche of Kyle Felvers as the Porsche of the Smart Fire car. Actually, I was going to say he's attacking Andy Carroll, but look at Alok Iyengar. He's so far over the right-hand side of the road that we didn't even see him going into the corner. Where is he coming out of it? I think he's alongside the Smart Fire Porsche. Yes, he is. They're going to be a drag race to T1.
Yes, they will indeed, side by side towards the first corner on the track, and Alok Iyengar looking to the inside of Oliver Gibson, who has been a bit up and down in this race so far. Looked as though he was making some good progress, but I think he was just sort of stuck in the middle, wasn't he? Quicker than the cars immediately ahead of him, but a bit slower than those immediately behind, and in the end he started losing positions quicker than he was gaining them. So up the hill they head again. Interestingly as well, Reese Bell in his brand new team continues to lead the race. Nicky Taylor can't find a way past him for now, but that might be about to change because Eric Axelson has arrived on their case. It's 3 for the lead, then Felvers 4th, Martin 5th, Carroll 6th, Iyengar 7th, Oliver Gibson 8th, Scott Bugner struggling down in 9th, and his teammate Lask also at the back of the top 10. This though, the fight for the race lead, and Taylor goes for it.
Yeah, Taylor's fed up of sitting behind Reese Bell. He sees a Corvette in his rear view camera and he decides that he doesn't want to be the first to be overtaken. He can let Reese Bell try and play rear gunner and try and blockade off the attack of the Swedish assassin. And look at that. Nicky Taylor cuts down to the apex and manages to fend off Reese Bell. And look at her trying to weave as they try and break the slipstream from all the cars behind them. How long will Nicky Taylor's defense hold up? Will Kyle Felvers be invited to the party? Will he get round Reese Bell in time to try and attack Eric Axelson before Eric Axelson gets past Nicky Taylor? All things that I'm sure we're going to be answered in the next couple of minutes, but we're not even halfway through this session, Andy, and it's already been very exciting.
It has indeed, and what a clinic Eric Axelson is putting on here tonight. He is already up into 2nd position, gained a lot of places on the opening lap. And as good a driver as Nicky Taylor undoubtedly is, I don't think he's going to have much of a defence here against Axelson, who is capable of lapping basically a second a lap or more quicker than the Porsche driver right now. Now remember though that Taylor is teammate to Kyle Felvers, and Nicky will already be thinking of championship here, I suspect. If he is not going to be a championship favourite, then perhaps he will go out of his way to defend here to try and help Felvers, who certainly will be. Felvers is going around the outside of Reese Bell, whilst Axelson tries the outside of Nicky Taylor. That will give him the inside for turn 2. Taylor needs to be careful to leave the space on the apex. He just about does. They almost banged doors, and the Porsche for now stays ahead.
Yeah, there's a lot of movement in the car along the track, isn't there, to try and defend off Eric Axelson and trying to break the slipstream and everything like that. At the moment, it looks like it's just about above board. I don't think he's getting in any kind of trouble for it, but I'm sure he's going to have to be slightly careful about how much he's using the attitude of that car to fend off an attack from that Corvette. We don't want anybody inadvertently crashing into one another, do we? But what he has done is let Kyle Felvers catch up to the back of these 2 drivers. He's managed to dispatch Reese Bell. In fact, Josh Martin has also got past Reese Bell. So if they do squabble over this for far too long, Josh Martin will be into the mix, and all of a sudden it'll be the green. What is Eric Axelson and Josh Martin's team name again? Is it the Lean Green Racing Machine or something like that?
Lean Green Frying Machine. No, the what are they called? They are the Mean Green Racing Team, which will take a
Racing
couple of
Team.
rounds for us to remember, I suspect.
Yes, the Lean Green Racing Team against HFT. I'm sort of hoping that Josh Martin and Eric Axelson come up with some kind of abbreviation themselves, to be honest.
Yes, MGRT does sound a bit too corporate, really, doesn't it? So
It
I'm
does.
sure they can come up with something better than that. What they have come up with right now is a fascinating race as Axel almost runs into the back of Nicky Taylor from a country mile back. Nicky is playing rolling roadblock here to try and help his teammate Carl Felvers. There's no doubt about it. Nicky doesn't have the ultimate pace, but he's perfectly entitled to hold on to the race lead. In fact, I'm just being reminded by Rich Hayden that he is not racing under the HFT Racing banner this time, Nicky Taylor, but we know that he's good friends with Kyle Felvers. Those two have worked well together in the past and are continuing to do so here. Taylor defending the inside from Axelson, who is going to have to get his elbows out here to make this move stick before Felvers has a go at him.
Sorry, I had my mic muted then all of a sudden, but we are watching the two drivers, and I tell you what, around the outside of T2 goes Eric Axelson with a good run off the corner. Carl Felvers is in amongst the fight as well. How kind will Nicky Taylor be? Will he move out of Carl Felvers' way? Will he get in the way? And all of a sudden, Josh Martin becomes a bit of a headache for the both of them. Eric Axelson has the opportunity, Andy, to pull away at this point, doesn't he? Because we know he's got the pace in the car. He's qualified on pole position. He led every single lap in the first race. If they're not careful, he will pull away with this one on those medium tyres.
I know it's sort of our job to sell this as being a really exciting race and it's all up for grabs and anything could happen, but I'd be amazed if Axelson doesn't win now, because the pace that he had in race 1, he should be able to pull away. And of course, remember, he's on the medium tyres this time as well. Remember how impressive his late race pace was on the softs. He should be even stronger now on the slightly more durable tyre. Shout out to Josh Martin as well, because he was struggling about 5 minutes ago, but he's actually clawed his way onto the back of this group as well. As you mentioned, he was closing, and he is now in contention for a podium place. Nicky Taylor certainly not moving out of the way of Carl Felvers right now, so that is allowing Axelson to pull away, and the other Mean Green Corvette to close in.
Yeah, well, the alarm company car, as I believe we're supposed to be calling it Nicky Taylor now, not HFT technically, although they are all working under the same sort of banner. Now jumping to the inside, is that to get out of the way, or is that to defend? It's to get out of the way there, Andy, isn't it? Because look at the over the speed that Carl Felvers has gotten there. They're all still on the Google Meet call, as they tend to do at every single round, and I think there was probably an instruction from higher up there.
Yes, indeed so. It's, as we've said, they're not officially teammates, but that's only because of the number of drivers per team limited to 2. So coming into this particular championship, Carl Felvers for HFT Racing teamed up with Ethan Hill. Where is Ethan? Ethan down in 13th, so having a bit of a rough night so far. Is the second HFT driver. No doubt about it, they're clearly working together still, and Carl Felvers will now set off after Eric Axelson. Although, as grateful as Kyle is for that second place, there'll be a part of him wishing that Nicky did that a lap ago, because the gap now that Axelson's pulled over Kyle, I suspect is going to be difficult for Felvers to reel in. He is on the softer tyre though, so if he's still got some tyre life in those softs, he might have a tyre advantage. I'd just be surprised if he does. There is Ethan Hill off the road. Just as we mentioned, he was having a difficult night. It becomes even more difficult, and he drops from 12th down to 15th.
Yeah, even though he's had a big off by the looks of it, he's still not in last place, is he? So I'm not entirely sure how badly Stuart Vickers and Ben Jemison's night has been, but obviously they were involved in that first lap, first turn, I should say, actually, scrap, weren't they? So it's not been ideal for those guys. At least Bell's been driving well, though, it has to be said, as we watch Elliot Dalton-Ayres spin that Ford back in the right direction, and Paul Laramie as well. All of a sudden, quite a lot of people falling off the circuit. If there were oil spills simulated in Assetto Corsa, we'd probably be accusing someone of dropping some oil somewhere, but it does seem to be everybody just maybe struggling with those tyres a little bit more.
Yeah, tyres certainly a factor here. Bahrain is one of the tougher tracks on the schedule as well for tyre wear. You really do lean on that left front through corners like that at turn 12 into turn 13. Very easy to wear out the left front. And of course, these being powerful rear-wheel drive GT cars, you're also worrying about the rear tyres in the traction zone. It's quite an abrasive, dusty surface, of course, at Bahrain. And that is, I would imagine, simulated at least in some way here on Assetto Corsa. And that will perhaps be playing its part as well. Josh Martin, though, looking to try and get onto the podium here if he can. to make it the same podium as we had in race 1. Axelsen from Felvis from Martin, but he needs to get a move on here because Scott Bugner is closing in, bringing with him Reece Bell and Joel Lask. Here comes Martin up the inside line. He's got the inside, he's got the preferred line into turn 1. He's late on the brakes too. Does the Corvette take third place? It might do, but Nicky Taylor tries to hang on around the outside, will succeed in doing so as well. But no, Josh Martin is going to be able to hang on to the place as they race towards turn 4.
Yeah, no prizes for guessing who's going to be in the championship, what the championship order is going to be. As they, Nicky Taylor looking up the inside there. I think that was a perspective from our camera angle actually, but all of a sudden a bit of heart and mouth in moment. But yeah, the podium for race 1 at the moment looks like it's going to be repeated for race number 2, unless Carl Felvis can really find some grip in those soft tyres, or Josh Martin can throw himself off again and let a Porsche overtake him in the final couple of laps. By the looks of his driving lines at the moment, Josh Martin's not making it easy.
Indeed he is not, and nor should he really, because Josh Martin, again, another driver who is very much thinking of the big picture, thinking of the championship, and really on a night at which he seems to be struggling a bit for outright pace, 2 third places would still be a really, really good points haul to take away from the Bahrain International Circuit. Scott Bugner, you can see, closing in on Nicky Taylor as well. He's another who will be looking to score points at any and every opportunity. Meanwhile, Jack, that lead gap is creeping down. So Kyle Felvis at this stage of the race still has the life in those soft tyres to at least keep Eric Axelsen sort of within range. Can he catch him though? Can he do anything with him? 4 minutes to go. It's a tough ask, but he's giving this absolutely everything.
Yeah, well, he probably needs to catch up about 4/10 before the slipstream really starts working in his favour, and all of a sudden you'll see the time tumbling away from him. But I've been very impressed with Eric Axelsen, to be honest, in this. I mean, I know we're so used to speaking to him after a pole position interview. We're so used to doing all this, that, and the other, but he hasn't really been around the front end of the order for the NASCARs or even the touring cars. It wasn't his best season, was it? But it seems he's jumped in these faster cars and he's took to a bit like a duck to water. I'm not saying that the rest of them haven't. Kyle's been brilliant as well. Josh Martin has as well. But they're such different beasts compared to what we used to here at the VRRC, even rolling it back to the League of Champions days. When I started, you know, we've never really done anything particularly like this, and I've been really impressed. I want to say with the driving standards to start with. I know there was an incident at turn 1 in race number 2, but realistically, apart from that, we haven't had too many massive incidents. It doesn't like anything malicious or major sort of gone down amongst the drivers that we've seen. Mainly sort of small mistakes that people created themselves. So I've been really impressed, and hopefully it sets up a good championship to come.
Yeah, I think so. One of the concerns perhaps isn't the right word, but one of the trepidations coming into this season was that these are much more powerful cars than we're used to driving. They're much faster as well. There was a little bit of uncertainty as to whether every driver on the grid would be able to handle that with the greatest of respect, because the great thing about the VRRC is that we cater to drivers of all experience levels. You don't have to be a sim racing superstar like Eric Axelsen in order to do well here, because we've got the compensation weight system, so the quicker drivers have to carry a little bit more ballast. That pegs them back a little. But these cars being tricky to drive, there was a little uncertainty as to how some drivers would handle it. But actually, we've seen a couple of little spins, one of them nearly from Josh Martin, who is our reigning champion after all. Apart from that, it's been really, really clean, some great side-by-side racing. We're not going to have quite the same amount of passing as we saw in touring cars. We've seen a good amount though, and it's been a good show. I've really enjoyed watching the races tonight, and I think there's plenty to keep us interested over the course of the season.
Yeah, I think the jump between the touring cars to NASCAR was a bit of a bigger one than it was to go from the touring cars / the NASCARs into this, wasn't there? Because a lot of the drivers, they'll be used to rear-wheel drive, they'll be used to sort of, just going around these sort of circuits. They've probably driven them on other sims as well, but to adapt to this is, I think, quite impressive. And as you said, it should set up a good season of racing for us as well. And I think there's a few other drivers here tonight that have shown that they've put a little bit more time and practice into it. I think Scott Bugner and Joel Lask, they sort of come a little bit further forward, in my opinion. I know Scott Bugner hasn't really had the best race 1, but his race 2 hasn't been too bad. Nicky Taylor, I think, will probably go away from this evening and probably think he needs to be able to go in and do some more practice laps. I think he's slightly under the weather, I heard, but it's not been the best evening for his sake, and I know he'll hate not being able to race further to the front. Even though he's in 4th place, his race 1 wasn't exactly ideal for his season, so I know he'll probably be going away and probably trying a little bit harder as well in the practices. Oliver Gibson's done well. Reece Bell's driven really top draw in this race number 2. He's never going to have quite the pace to hold off a lot of these really quick guys, but running in 7th place is nothing to be sniffed at.
No, absolutely not. And I was about to make the point, actually, about Nicky Taylor that you sort of just made there. 4th place is not bad for a driver who I thought was going to get gobbled up by the pack. And I wonder whether maybe this is those medium tyres now starting to come to his rescue. Plus, of course, every lap that he does of practice in race is an extra lap of practice, and that's going to help him get quicker. Don't throw it away, as I'm saying nice things about you, Nicky. That was close to the commentator's curse, and it has scuppered his run onto that short stretch towards the final corner. The final corner is Eric Axelsen. Is he about to see a checkered flag? It's going to be mighty close, but I think the time will just tick down to 0. Yes, checkered flag for Eric Axelsen. Pole position, 2 race wins. Doesn't get better than that. 2nd for Felvers, 3rd for Martin. It's the same podium as we had in race 1. Nicky Taylor just fending off Scott Bugner for 4th, whilst Joel Lass also recovers well there to 6th. Neither of those BMWs were running all that well earlier on. Reece Bell, Oliver Gibson, Alok Iyengar and Andy Carroll will complete the top 10 at the end of what was a very entertaining race. Race 1, as I said, a little bit tame, as you might expect at season start, but the second race providing us with action aplenty. That was really, really good fun. The rest of the cars coming across the line, Sam Zero, Kenny Press, Ethan Hill, who had a spin earlier on as well, with Stuart Vickers, Paul Laramie and Ben Jemison, who will be the last cars home there. Is Vickers, having started at the front, he will finish in 15th. Really didn't get off the line well, did he, Stuart Vickers? And that really was where he lost a lot of his position. Laramie 16th. And Ben Jemison, new driver to the grid. I'm sure we'll see him getting faster as the season goes on. And he will come across the line in 17th position at the back of the pack. But a lot learned, I'm sure, over the course of the last hour or so. We'll have all of the reaction then to our second race in a moment or two. And we will be back with all of that after this short break. Welcome back to the VRRC, the Cammus Simulation GTV3 Championships. Opening night has concluded, nearly. We've got a few interviews to come from our top 3, and it will be a bit of a rinse and repeat situation from race 1, because despite the full reversal of the grid, we ended up with the same 3 drivers in the top 3 positions and in the same order as well. It is a, quite literally, perfect night for Eric Axelsen, who kick-starts his campaign to reclaim the number 1 slot here at the VRRC with a pole position, 2 race wins, 2 fastest laps, maximum points for Eric Axelsen. Eric, that sounds good.
Yeah, that's crazy. I never, thought that was going to happen. I had such a crazy start in the second race. I went from P last to P5 in T1. So that was pretty crazy.
Talk us through that, actually, because we saw you pop out up inside the top 5 with a little bit of damage on your car. So I'm guessing everyone didn't just put the indicator on and move out of the way. There was a bit going on in that first corner.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't see much of it, to be honest. It was just uh, hooked like w- wall of cars, and yeah, and I don't know, I found a way like out of it, and I was fine, and I was at P5, so I'm just lucky, mate. It was pure luck there.
Well, you need a bit of luck in this game. You also need a bit of speed as well, and you found that once you'd settled in after the safety car restart, and you found that speed on the medium tyre as well. Interesting to see you going for a different strategy that time. What was the thought process behind that?
Yeah, I wasn't sure which like a tire to use in second race. To be honest, it was like a last minute choice. To be fair, so yeah, I think like by the time I was behind Reese and Nikki, my like medium tires was in the prime like window. So yeah, for the second half of the race, they were great, and I think I had the pace.
Absolutely. Once you got in front, you were able to stretch the gap nicely and claim another victory. A perfect night, really. Does that relax you a bit now going into week 2, or in a way is the pressure on now because we're all expecting a lot from you next week as well?
Oh yeah, the pressure is always on. It's seven rounds left, and but this is a track I like, and there will be like some tracks up ahead that I haven't even tried before. So yeah, it's gonna be interesting, and I think it's gonna be tough. You know,
Sure. Well, so far, so good for Eric Axelson. Maximum points haul from Bahrain. And Eric, we'll see you again next week. Well done.
thank you.
Eric Axelson then with another race victory. And as I said, the same top 3 in the same order as race number 1. So it's going to be a very similar interview, I'd imagine, with our second place finisher now and Jack Oliphant.
Yes, Kyle Felvis back on second place at the podium. Talk us through that one. Obviously, we got a little bit of a perspective from Eric on his race start. I'm going to ask you how on earth your race start went as well, because I heard you chatting to Josh Martin before we went live, before the interviews as well, a little bit sort of from what you guys saw. So talk us through it.
Yeah, I mean, my restart, the jump off the line, it wasn't great. Eric got a really good jump, so he went past me, and then I'm sort of right at the back, so it's just deciding, do I want to go up the inside, do I want to go around the outside? Eventually, I chose the outside, and Josh was on my inside, and I couldn't see what was going on, but I think there was a massive crash between maybe 4 cars or something on the inside of turn 1, and yeah, it just luckily chose the right uh, way and went around the outside of it all. And then from there, it was, yeah.
Well, you sound like it was, Eric was doing the same, almost like it was lucky or that he didn't really deserve it or anything. But you got to be aware in these sort of situations, haven't you? Turn one's always going to be a bit messy here at Bahrain. You mentioned your race start there, though, off the line. And I'm going to go back to race number 1. I feel like we're sort of focusing on the negatives here a little bit of your evening with 2 second places. It shouldn't be done. But the race start in race number 1, talk us through that one. Have you just not practiced the starts quite as much as you were hoping to, or sort of what happened there?
I think race 1 was a issue. I forgot to turn my traction control off for the start. I was
Ah.
still on traction control, so the wheels sort of just it all just bogged down, and I didn't get the best start. And then race 2, Eric just got a better start than me.
Oh, fair enough. I was going to say there's one thing just getting a better start. Race 1 did seem uncharacteristic for you, so was thinking there was a story there. 2 second places though going into the out of the first evening of the championship. Though that's never to be sniffed at, is it? Are you sort of looking forward to maybe putting some practice in at the later stages and hopefully putting a bit of a title charge on?
Yeah, I mean Monza's going to be great. I think the Porsche will be quite suited to Monza, a lot of straights, so should be pretty good round there. And then week 3, I'm going to have to miss, so I'm going to have to use that as my drop round and then perform well the rest of the season.
Well, you normally do, Kyle, and you normally put on a show for us as well. Congratulations on the 2 second places, and I'm sure we'll be speaking to you next week.
Thank you, Jack.
Excellent stuff. Well done to Kyle Felvis. Then second place finish for him. And hopefully we've got a bit more time this time to chat to our third place finisher, Josh Martin, who had another eventful race. You probably had the most exciting night of any of our podium finishers. Josh, a real battle on your hands in both of those races.
Yeah, see, that race was progress for me. I haven't really done that many long runs, and I learned in the first race that trying to push a bit too hard and a bit of overdriving, sliding around a bit really doesn't help you when you start getting near the end of the race, because that just gets worse and worse and worse. So yeah, that race I definitely made a conscious effort to try and not push as hard and save the tires. And yeah, I did set my fastest lap on the last lap of that race, which was obviously a lot better than the last race. But yeah, I was thick of the action. I was pleased with both my launches. That second race, I kind of got a bit almost stuck in the middle. I got a really good launch, and that put me between Joel and Scott, so I didn't really have much choice on which way to go. And then I could see the cars were all bunching up on the inside, so I knew I didn't want to be anywhere near that. And then yeah, don't know what happened, but managed to avoid it all. And yeah, and then it was just trying to get through the traffic all nice and cleanly, and trying to minimize the mistakes I made from the last one.
Yeah, well, it's good to see that you were getting better as well as the night went on. And I think it's going to be a bit like that for most drivers this season, isn't it? These are very different cars from the ones that you're used to racing. And I think we will see the field get, if it's possible, even more competitive as the weeks go on. How hard have you personally found it to learn the intricacies of these GTE cars?
Yeah, it's a weird one because I feel I get on quite well with this car in terms of actually controlling it and driving it. And consistency is normally my strong point, and I'm normally quite good come the end of the race. So it was almost a little bit confusing that the first race, how I was like almost completely backwards to where I normally would be. So I guess I just need to spend a bit more time probably practicing longer runs, because I've done a lot of just short, fast runs. So I feel quite happy driving the car quickly, but I think I need to definitely work on the bringing it back a bit, because it's not like a touring car. A touring car you can drive a lot more flat out. I think in this car you've got to just rein it in a little bit. But yeah, I'm sure I'll figure it out and crack the way of driving this thing.
Confidence in you, Josh. You didn't get that number one on the side of your car by luck alone, that's for sure. So we'll wait and see how you get on at Monza next week. But congratulations, a really solid start to the season here tonight.
Cheers. Thank you very much.
So there you have it then, our first pair of races of the season done. We've got Eric Axelsen really on top form so far. It seems he is on top of the point standings, of course. It doesn't take a maths genius to work that out after what has been a pretty flawless night for him, Jack.
Yeah, it's a bit of a reminder to his form back in the MX5s, I think. I can't remember where we were now, actually. It was Laguna Seca that he absolutely dominated that, and we couldn't see anybody else in the championship catching him. Everybody else did step it up after that round, and I fully expect that everyone's going to do a similar thing this time, this championship as well. By the sounds of it, everybody enjoys driving the GTE cars, the GTV3 championship. But it's certainly going to take a lot to try and catch the Swedish assassin. That's for sure. I think we'll be able to bring up the championship standings. In fact, there we go. Yes, I was saying that tentatively because they were slightly broken earlier on, but they have been fixed now. And as you can see, Eric Axelsen with 57 points ahead of Kyle Felvers, with those two second places having 44, 4 points ahead of Josh Martin, as Andy has said. Not at all surprising to see those three at the top of the championship in that order. Joel Lask is currently 1 point ahead of his teammate Scott Bugner. They're in fourth and fifth, respectively, with Nicky Taylor being a little bit further down than he's probably used to in sixth position. He'll be having to climb up the table in the coming weeks, I'm sure. Oliver Gibson is seventh. Elliot Dalton-Eyre is in eighth. Alok Iyengar is in ninth. And Reece Bell, after that strong race two, currently sits in the top 10 and rounds out the top 10 as it stands as well. Right. I think that's pretty much all we've got time for in terms of this championship. So I believe all we really need to do, Andy, is bring up what's occurring at VRRC across the VRRC verse, shall we say?
Yeah, that's right. We've had a few weeks off from these regular championship broadcasts, but that doesn't mean that we've been sitting idly by. No, there's plenty going on behind the scenes, including a couple of new series coming up in the very near future. Many of you, I'm sure, tuned in to watch the NASCAR special event. Well, through a little bit of lobbying from me, although I must admit, actually, it didn't take as much work to convince everyone as I thought it would. We are going to be running our first ever full NASCAR championship. It's a championship that's going to run over the standard 8-week format that we've become used to over Wednesday nights. not being broadcast on this occasion, but this is an advert to everyone out there watching. If you want to get involved, then you can do so. It's a sort of fun, relaxed way for us all to learn a little bit more about NASCAR, perhaps with the hopes of having more of it in the future. It all starts at Daytona on the 2nd of March, a full 8-week calendar taking in everything that NASCAR has to offer, including a road course event at Watkins Glen. And you'll be surprised to hear, Jack, that I'm very much looking forward to it.
I was going to say, you said it's slightly lobbied for it. I'm pretty sure you broke Rich's door down, didn't you, with the idea? No, I'm kidding. Rich actually said he really enjoyed the special events that we put on, as did a lot of the other drivers as well. So if you're out there and want to get involved, that is a championship that Andy said is not being broadcast. That means it's a slightly cheaper entry fee. You can see all of the details down and the links to below if you just go to the VRRC website, which is one of the links below as well. That's not all that we've got going on at the NASCAR Championship. We've, of course, got the time trials going on at the moment, but I think we're about to finish up on round number 2. Yes, I believe we are. The 6th of February, we're going into the mini JCW around Alton Park Island circuit. So, yeah, you only have a couple of more days, well, 5 more days actually, before we go into the mini JCW. And then you have 2 weeks to set your lap times before we head into the Cupra TCR. Yet another fantastic mod that VRRC have played with over the years and made it just utterly superb around the equally superb Valencia street circuit. So yeah, the time attack, the front wheel drive time attacks starting to come to about the halfway stage before we change it up and change into a different formula, or a different theme, I should say, actually, as well. And I believe that is all she wrote. I don't think we've got much else to talk about in terms of VRRC. Next up, I'm just waiting to see if Lewis Edwards brings any other graphic up in front of me. And there we go. He loves to prove me wrong, doesn't he? The next special event, of course, which is very many weeks away. I don't really know why we're talking about it just yet, but we are apparently. So it's going to be a 3-race special event, and we're going to be in the trucks. And it's going to be around UK circuits. Apparently, we don't have the circuit on the graphics or anything like that, but I won't spoil exactly where we're going because it might not be set in stone just yet. But the next special event we had the NASCARs is going to be trucks. And I tell you what, Andy, that is going to be very interesting. Probably about as much of a learning curve as NASCAR was.
Absolutely. I'm lobbying for a 3-week event based around the Knockhill Rallycross course. I reckon Rich Hayden may have an opinion on that, which is probably not broadcastable. But yes, the Virtual Truck Racing Championship special event, again, running very much similarly to the NASCAR special event, a 3-week one-off championship where we'll be doing things a little bit differently. And I reckon, Jack, I got behind the wheel for the NASCAR. I think we might need to stick you in one of these trucks and see how you get on.
Oh, I'll tell you what, I'll be a 100-mile-an-hour missile going into T1 at Brands Hatch if that's where we go. But I'll give it a go. You never know.
Excellent. There we go. I'll hold you to that. That is all we have time for here tonight. There. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you've enjoyed our first taste of GT action here at the VRRC. Certainly produced 2 interesting races here at the Bahrain International Circuit, but so far, Eric Axelsen firing on all cylinders, back to his very best with a maximum points haul from the opening night of racing. He'll be laden with a bit more ballast, though, when we turn up at Monza in northern Italy in a week's time. A very different kind of track, one that is guaranteed to produce some good slipstreaming action. Be sure to join us then. Same time, same place for round 2 of the Cammus Simulation GTV3 Championship.